Welcome to the Velo Residential Operate for Profit podcast with JC Castillo, where we help multifamily real estate owners just like you take control of their operations so they can stop stressing out and start making more money.
Welcome to the Operate for Profit podcast, where we help you make more money with less stress. I'm your host, JC Castillo, founder and CEO of Velo Residential, and joining me as always is the co-pilot of this show, Mr. Paul Peebles, national underwriter for Old Capital Lending. Paulie, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great, JC. I'm super excited about this episode that you're going to have a conversation with our guest. You know, Operate for Profit is such a key thing when it comes to managing your apartment building. There's a lot of people out there that want to get you into the apartment business, but they don't teach you the apartment business to operate your property. So JC does a wonderful job about trying to teach you and educate you about how to make money on these deals and what's smart and what's not so smart when you own an apartment building. So in today's episode that I'm super excited about is somebody that teaches leasing agents through just real world, simple sales training techniques specifically pushed out to the apartment industry. And it reminds me of a story. It goes back a couple of years ago that there was a group that came in from California, wanted to buy a property in Texas. And they really did not know what the hell they were doing. They sold a fourplex they brought $1 million out of California. They were buying a $4 million 100-unit building at that period of time. And they just had money, but they really weren't that smart of guys. And I said, now, going through the lending process, I said, now, who's going to manage the property? You guys live in California. This property is here in Texas. And, oh, we have somebody. I said, fantastic. Who is that? Well, her name is, Donna. I said, okay, tell me a little bit about Donna's experience. Well, we just brought her into the team, and she's going to manage the property. I said, where did she work for before? Well, she worked at Denny's before. I said, what did she do? Well, we met her when we came in last time when we looked at this apartment building, that she served us our pancakes and our sausage, and she was an attractive gal, and she was able to take our order, and we liked that, and we made her offer to her to if she wanted to get into the apartment business, that she was going to be one of our teammates to manage the property. And I was just like listening to this conversation. I was like shaking my head. I said, are you kidding me? Well, they hired her. She became a manager of the property, as you could probably imagine, with no experience in the apartment industry. It was terrible. And I'm not going to say Donna was the problem, but Donna probably did not have the structure to support, didn't go through sales training to kind of understand how to talk with potential clients, potential tenants on the phone. So Donna kind of fell apart, and that whole deal kind of fell apart. Trying to manage a property from a distance.
And Paul, that's such a great story, and it's such a good segue into sort of why we think this topic is so important. Let's face it, Paul. Coming out of the pandemic, there has been a little bit more of a challenge in terms of occupancies are down at these properties. Rents have stalled out. A little bit. There isn't been as much rent growth. In fact, in some ways, it's been stagnant. So owners and management companies have to work a lot harder these days to close up leases and get residents to fill up those slots. And so, if you are an owner out there and you're working with a property management company, you got to make sure that property management company is really focused on giving the right training to the on-site staff to be able to close those opportunities, because every opportunity that walks in that door, every opportunity that calls in, every opportunity that emails your property into your property about possibly leasing, if you don't have the best, fully skill-setted, trained out leasing agents that can go close that deal, you are going to be leaving money on the table. And that is not a good feeling to be in, especially when we're in an economy where we really need to start to fight for every lease and make sure that we're not spending money as much as we may have in the past. So Paul, the problem today that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about how to increase your revenue by having sales machines or leasing agents that can come in and close as many of those leases that you can think of at your property.
Yeah, skilled people on the front end of the conversation is what you have. And so the gentleman that we have on is fantastic. He is the the recognized leader nationally on sales techniques and sales training for apartments to try to increase revenue, 7 times of what you're currently doing. So he is definitely the person that you want to listen to. So, JC, again, set the table. Who we talking to, and go from there.
Yeah, Matt Easton is, like you said, Paul, he is the national go-to guy, not just I'm talking about for big apartment conglomerates. They go to this guy for information on how to lease more units at these huge properties and huge conglomerates. So Matt Easton has a company called Leasing University. He's all over social media. Folks, you want to check him out, but you got to listen into this episode. He is going to teach you all about the new future of leasing your apartment units. And I guarantee you, if you spend some time with this guy, one, his energy is off the chart. He is amazing, got amazing energy. And two, he is super passionate about showing you how you can lease more units at your property, Paul. That is the deal with this episode.
All right, without further ado, let's go to the conversation between Matt and JC.
Well, Matt, listen, thank you so much for joining our podcast. I am so excited to have you on our show because, first of all, your energy is off the charts, Matt. You've got to give our listeners a hello and just give them a taste of what they're in for.
JC, Paul, it's an honor to be here. Huge fan of the podcast, and I am so excited. On today's episode, we're going to debunk a lot of the misinformation, some of it being complete garbage, on what it takes to sell that community, on what it takes to keep it occupied, to keep those residents in there, and to keep that top line revenue flowing. My name's Matt Easton. I'm the founder of Leasing University. If you haven't heard of us, we're the #1 sales training in the world for your frontline people so they can work through those issues with renters, make sure that they're closing those leases, make sure that they're bringing in as much rent as possible and getting those renewals.
Matt, what's so exciting about what you're talking about here is that, look, this is the Operate for Profit podcast. And I say it all the time. We're not operating for fun. We're in the business to make money, right? We're in the business to make money. And so the easiest way to make money is to increase your top line revenue, folks. And that is a big challenge for a lot of multifamily owners out there. And also a lot of property management companies that are operating their properties for these owners. And so, Matt, with the pandemic, right, what's happened is that, before the pandemic, we were seeing pretty strong rent growth. Everything was very highly occupied. We hit a speed bump with the pandemic and things seem to be coming around, but it's just not as easy as it was in the old days. And so, I think a lot of multifamily listeners out there, a lot of owners that are out there listening to this podcast are going, look, it's not as easy for me to get my revenue up these days. I've got to figure out how to lease these units and do a better job at it. I think that's exactly the problem that we're looking to solve. And you are exactly the right type of person that's got the background to tell us how to do it. So, Matt, before we go there, tell us, the story of how you got into being an expert in leasing, and tell us why you're so passionate about this.
Yeah, I'm so passionate about this because there's a huge problem. I'll tell you what that is. But to answer your question, how I got started, I'm sales and entrepreneurial all the way. I've started a number of companies. I've worked for Fortune 500 companies. I ran the American Customer Satisfaction Index for a while. Sales is in my blood. I understand the process. I understand what it takes. That being said, as an owner and investor myself, many years ago, stepping into this industry, I was instantaneously like, whoa, where's the sales process? Just didn't see it. And there's a reason for that. We can touch on that in a little bit, JC, but didn't see that process, built one, created a way to easily communicate, train, and install that sales process. And for the folks that are taking advantage of it, they're finding it's made leasing, it's made increasing top line revenue a lot easier for their company.
Well, Matt, look, as a property management company, right, Velo Residential is able to track a lot of our stats. And, look, we know how many leads are coming into our properties per month.
Yep.
We know how many of those leads are converting into showings. And we know how many of those showings are converting into leases. We sort of have a number system, right? We see the numbers all the time. But, in terms of the people that are actually getting in the door and they're coming and sitting down for a showing, and the ones that are actually filling out an application and getting approved for a lease, I mean, if we can just improve that stat, I mean, even like 0.5%, we're talking big numbers, Matt. So, I mean, look, tell us, what is the secret to increasing our close ratio with leasing?
Yeah. So the secret, JC, is forgetting everything that you've been taught about leasing apartments. And I'm going to repeat that again because it's really important. An owner and an operator needs to forget all of this information that they've been bombarded with. Why? Okay. That world, and that was a world, it does not exist anymore. And it's not coming back. I don't want to depress anybody, but let me paint a picture for you. JC, when I was in college, this is how I rented an apartment. I'd drive to the grocery store. I'd look for a little thing. It looked like a newspaper stand. Some of the listeners might not even understand what a newspaper stand looks like. It's a metal box, right? Inside said metal box was a thing called the for rent guide, right? And you'd grab that for rent guide. There'd be a handful of ads, or your other option was to go to the newspaper, right? And you'd look at the classified ad. In both for rent and the newspaper, maybe if they were spending a lot of money, 5 lines worth of information about the property. Most people couldn't afford that, so they were at 2 or 3 lines of information. So what you would do, JC, is you would then call those 3 or 4 options that you had, right? They would answer the phone. Hello. Hi, I'm calling about a 2-bedroom apartment. Okay, hold on. And they click away at their keyboard and I've got one available. Great, I'll be right there, right? And you run down because there'd be an apartment available. JC, those days are gone. They're not coming back. We've got this. We've got this. I'm talking to you about apartments right now. What do you think's going to happen when I go on Instagram tonight at dinner?
He's showing me his iPhone, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who aren't seeing this but are hearing this.
Right. We've all experienced this, right? You talk with your friend about a dog bed, and then you get served up a bunch of ads, right, for dog beds. What does all that mean? That means today, JC, in 2021, and we're just beginning to scratch the surface, today's renter has more information than ever before. Our research at Leasing University shows, even in the last 18 months, the amount of information that a renter has available at their fingertips has grown 240% over 18 months. So today's renter has more information. Because of all of the great people that listen to the podcast, amazing podcast, by the way, investing, buying, owning. I was in Nashville last week. I think I counted 8 cranes. Most of those cranes were building residential. Today's renter also has more choices than ever before. So long story short, JC, this world of you're going to spend all this money on advertising, the phone's going to ring, and the people are still going to, okay, hold on, when do you need to move in? What's your budget, right? They may have a little bit better tonality than that lady from the 1980s. Some of them don't, but they have the wrong process. It's not about checking somebody's budget, okay? First of all, I invest in apartments. I don't know what the rent should be. How can you expect a prospect to know that? It's about having a process that curates the information, right? Because they already have so much information. Your salespeople need to curate. Hey, JC, because of the fact that you told me you want to work from home and you need a space, this is what I want to show you. Very simple questions, focusing on what that person's current situation looks like. What does their ideal scene look like? And then how do I communicate the value of my apartment in a way that makes sense to them?
You know, gosh, Matt, there's so many great things you just said right there. But I want to stop it right there because you said something amazing. You said curate an experience. You know, look, Matt, here's the deal, right? We have leasing agents at our properties, you know, at our management company, and they're getting phone calls and they're taking leads and talking to prospective tenants every day. And there's all these tenants that are saying, you know, and the prospects will say, look, I've got a budget of X, right? And automatically, if our leasing agents aren't thinking the right thing, they're just going to basically disqualify that person from our apartment. You talked about curating an experience. Matt, can you tell me what you mean by that and why maybe them thinking about the budget as the first thing when they're trying to sell a unit might be the worst thing they can do?
Yeah, this is why folks that go through, and there's like 1,000 video testimonials on our website. I can take any leasing agent, I don't care how much experience they have, and make them number one in their game. Okay. And I'm going to prove it to you right now. I didn't even know you were going to ask me that question. Okay. Budget. Let me show you the exact way to handle that. So JC, give me a number. Let's say they call in and they say what their budget is, right?
Yeah, let's say it's $1,000. That's all I got to spend on this unit. That's it. That's all I can do, Matt. That's my budget. You got to tell me if you got that. Otherwise, I'm going to go start looking around.
JC, $1,000 makes total sense to me. I'm writing that down, $1,000. Hey, JC, just out of curiosity, when you say $1,000, compared to what? Where you're living at right now, other places that you're looking at, or what you had expected to pay. This is the difference between my sales training and the typical what you get at everybody else. Hold on, let me check. Oh, I don't have anything available at $1,000. Let's break that down, okay? First of all, nobody shops for an apartment for fun. I'm going to repeat that because it's really important. Name the last time a party bus with a bachelorette party rolled up to your apartment complex to shop for apartments. They don't do it, okay? There's a reason why they're calling you. They already saw what you have. Most of the time, they already know what the price is. But when you say budget, when they say budget, realize a budget has to exist compared to something. So it's important as a professional to take that information and expand on it. Because JC, if you're paying $1,000 right now, which is the most common answer, well, that's what I'm paying right now. Nobody shops for an apartment for fun, okay? They hate where they're living right now, or else they would stay there. Or their current community is raising their rent. Again, we need to be professional. Compared to what? What's the second answer? Other places that I'm looking at. Oh, well, I went on apartments.com and there's 5 of them for under $1,000, right? Got it, JC, makes perfect sense to me. Hey, what's most important to me is that we find something that you love. I've written down $1,000, right? I've got it written down here. If you don't mind, let's kind of hold that off to the side. Let me figure out what's most important to you, what that ideal scene looks like. If I'll try and get as close to that as I can at my community, if I don't have something, I'm an expert in the industry. I can point you in the right direction once I know what you want, JC, and save you a bunch of time. Fair enough? Now you get somebody that's totally priced. Wow, I'm glad I called this person. They're going to help me, because when I go to apartments.com, there's a sea of green triangles. Okay. What's the third answer they can give you on budget? Well, that's what I was hoping to pay. Got it. Makes perfect sense to me, right? That's the easiest one to answer. Maybe they're moving from Broken Bow, Oklahoma, where $1,000 will get you a 4-bedroom with its own pool, right? You got to be able to have a system to answer these things. There's no trickery. There's no manipulation. I don't teach 1,000 different closes. I teach them to work with the prospect, right? You have to have a communication, a dialogue with that prospect. And it's all in terms of what questions are you asking? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love where you're going with that. And I mean, I think what you're saying is basically you're saying, look, the person has that number from some sort of a reference point.
Yeah.
Your job is to acknowledge it, but then to start really focusing on what they're really looking for their next place to live. Because as you rightly pointed out, they're moving out of their place for a very good reason. And you got to try to figure out what that reason is and really try to focus on solving the problems that they're really looking for, which is really, like you said, people are not looking for fun. And it's not just about the money. They really want to feel like they're coming to a home that they can really care about and be happy with.
100%. 2 points on that, JC. You're spot on. Let me just add to that a little bit. On the budget, our data shows budget falls about number 11. So it doesn't even break the top 10 in what's most important to somebody. If budget was the most important thing to us, we would all live in a van down by the river, right? Because we can get a van for $400, a creeper van, right? That says free candy on the side for $450. If budget was the most important thing, they would not be calling you. Here's the other thing that if the listeners have to drop off right now and they catch none of this podcast, okay? I want their people to realize this. Go back and tell your people this. There is no perfect piece of real estate. And I'm going to illustrate that for you. There's a little place called Star Island in Florida. Okay. Oprah Winfrey has got a house there. Everybody that has a house there, you know their names. I believe they compete with Singapore for most expensive real estate in the world. Go Google Earth Star Island. Go Google Earth Oprah's house. You're going to see construction. Now, wait a minute. How is it that a billionaire would constantly have construction going on at their place? Because there's no perfect piece of real estate out there. It just doesn't exist. So we have to train our people to handle objections versus try and overcome them, because this is real estate, right? You have to know the difference between an objection, a complaint. You have to be able to ask the right questions instead of just constantly having leasing staff with this asset worth millions of dollars when they hear simple things like, that's out of my budget. I don't like stairs. That closet's too small. Not having training to keep it light, positive, and flow with that person. Just because something's not in their budget or they've got a few complaints does not mean that this is not the perfect piece of property.
If you're an apartment owner in Dallas-Fort Worth, or if you're thinking of buying in the area and you're looking for an expert property management partner that knows exactly what it takes to get you the highest return for your investment, go to operateforprofit.com to find out how you can hire Velo Residential and start investing with confidence.
There's probably a lot of investors and owners out there of multifamily, and you're an investor in multifamily. At least you were,
Yes.
some time back. And so, maybe they're going, well, you know what? That's actually a problem that I need to have my property management company worry about. Matt, tell our listeners out there sort of what should be their best way to take all this amazing information that you're giving out and translate that into an actual plan that's going to incorporate actionable things, but maybe that they won't be doing because, they're not managing their own properties.
Yeah. So good news, bad news on the third party property managers. And we have over 500 management companies that are clients of ours. Many of them are third parties. I don't want to get in trouble with them, but none of them would disagree with me privately, maybe publicly, with what I'm about to tell you. A lot like healthcare. Okay, if you have very serious illness or very serious healthcare related issue, anybody who's been through that or understands that is going to say the most important thing for you, if you're experiencing some sort of healthcare crisis, is for you to learn and be your own advocate, right? You cannot expect your insurance company or even your physician to constantly have your best interests in mind. And what we found with third-party managers, fantastic group of people. At the end of the day, typically, they're most interested in keeping you as a client. They're not really interested in change. They're not really interested in rocking the boat. So you as an owner and an operator need to be your own advocate for your top line revenue, because if you expect them to work as hard to increase that occupancy 3% as you would, it's just not going to happen. At the end of the day, they're juggling 37 clients. And if everybody's 92 to 95% occupied, they're doing their job. They're going to go home and sleep really well at night. That's the bad news. The good news is if you lean on them just even a little bit, they come around very, very quickly. I'm willing to do a free training for, listeners that have a third party manager. If they've got a larger group, I'll jump on the phone with those people for 20 minutes. I'll coach them up. They'll see a huge, huge increase in leases just days after that. But you cannot expect third-party management companies to seek that type of information out on their own. They're not as motivated as the owner is.
Yeah. And I mean, look, in coming from a third-party property management perspective, which Velo Residential we are, what I can tell you is that what you're saying makes a whole lot of sense. And although I would say that we are one of those companies that cares dearly about having good leasing techniques and being able to move units, I absolutely happen to fully agree with you that these owners out there have to be a little bit proactive, right? They've got to be involved in the process at some point to say, hey, look, we're not just going to hand the keys over to this management company and just say, hey, talk to us next month when you're sending us the distribution checks. If they're not staying involved, if they're not sort of helping to go over the numbers of how leasing is going and where we may be struggling as a management company managing their asset, I think definitely there is going to be a little bit more suffering on that side for sure. You are absolutely right about that.
Well, and you have to look, in your defense as a third-party manager, and I'm not saying any of your owners are doing this, but a lot of times the owners don't have their eye on the ball, or they have their eye on the wrong ball, and they're leaning on that third-party manager constantly on things like cost reduction, right? How can I reduce expenses? They're not typically leaning on the third-party manager for top-line revenue. It's the little ticky-tack things that wouldn't even be an issue if we could really, really streamline top-line revenue and lead to lease conversion. Not such a big deal on cost reduction then at that point.
You found a great apartment property in Dallas-Fort Worth. It shows a lot of promise, but it needs some work. If you're looking for an expert renovation and construction management partner to help you transform your property into a vibrant community where people want to live, go to renovateforprofit.com to find out how you can hire Velo Residential and start investing with confidence.
We were talking before we started recording on air, and I just love what you had talked about, and I just want you to go over this with the listeners out there. Traditionally, as a property management company and also as an owner operator, which I've been in the past, I've sort of worn all the different shoes. We always think in general terms that if we're 100% occupied, that basically means what? Our rents are just a little bit too low. And, if we are, 92 or 93% occupied, but maybe revenue management software is telling us that that's just the right mix for us to make the maximum revenue. Mm-hmm. I think you may have a little bit of a different take on that, if I remember correctly.
I do. And I believe you made an absolutely valid and accurate statement that rent may be too low if you're 100% occupied. The key differentiator there is may. When the industry norm, the legend out there, right? There's some misinformation floating around there. The legend, when we play the game of telephone, it gets to your rent is too low if you're 100% occupied. That's not necessarily the case if you have a correct sales process. If that were the case, the price of Teslas would increase by $7,000 on a weekly basis, right? Because Tesla cannot keep cars in stock. Okay. However, they've determined their sweet spot. They have an excellent sales process. So they're just going to lean on that and then hopefully build more supply. The same way an owner that has a great sales process and is priced right should then be focused on how do I rinse? How do I repeat? How do I scale? What's the next asset that I'm going to buy? There's a lot of misinformation kind of left over from the past on 92, 98, whatever, depending on your region. There's different mythical numbers that they think are comfortable. Most of that data is based around, and if you don't believe me, go call. It's amazing how few owners actually call apartment communities. Go call apartment communities as if you were a renter. You are going to be shocked at how awful that sales process is. So we're able to occupy a $150 million apartment community, right, at 94% with a sales process where the person doesn't even know what to say when they answer the phone. They're saying things like, hey, thanks for calling Meadows. This is JC. How can I help you? If you say your name and how can I help you when you answer the phone, worst possible things you could say in multifamily. So they're able to get to 94% without a sales process. That's where I push back on that industry data a little bit is what would that number be if somebody was saying, it's a great day at Meadows. What can I get you information on? I'm calling about availability. Availability? Yeah, I'm looking for a 2-bedroom. Excellent. What research have you done on our community? Right? Nobody has a flow. Right?
I mean, just hearing you say that, just like me as a renter, I'm going to want to engage with you, and it's so clear as day. And I think anybody out there that's listening to you is agreeing with you. That is such an incredible point, Matt. We're here. So what I want to do, Matt, is, gosh, I could talk to you for another hour, and that is for sure. But you have such great information on your website. You have such a great presence on social media. I mean, people could literally watch a video of yours and in like 30 seconds learn more about leasing than most people would learn in a year just sitting at a property, and that's no joke. Can you please tell our listeners out there how they can check out your information, how they can get a hold of you, and give them a little bit of information on that?
Yeah, so we're at leasinguniversity.com, leasinguniversity.com. Our phone number is 888-735-7451. And I want to do something special for your listeners, for you, JC, for Paul, anybody that's in the family here at the podcast. I cannot, and I hope you can appreciate this, I cannot do like a one-on-one coaching session. But if you have a group of maybe 10 or more, okay, and you're a listener of the podcast, call into our offices, mention that you found it on the podcast. I'll be willing to do a free 20-minute Zoom coaching with your people as long as you've got more than 10. And I guarantee you will have a lot more additional revenue just by me spending 20 minutes with your people in a Zoom setting, helping correct just a few of these behaviors and helping reset their mindset on all these things that they thought were bad opportunities, bad leads, were actually great leads. They just got to hang in there and ask the right questions.
Wow, that is an awesome offer, folks. Matt, give that information out again, just in case somebody didn't quite finish writing it down.
Yeah, so head over to leasinguniversity.com or call our offices at 888-735-7451. If you mention the podcast, and only if you mention the podcast, all right? So don't go sharing this out. You have to be a listener of the podcast. Until my schedule totally fills up, I don't want to say no unless I absolutely have to. I will coach your people as long as you have more than 10 of them for 20 minutes. It's my gift to you guys. It's my gift because you're a friend of JC's, because you're a friend of Paul's. I will be more than happy to do that.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for that offer. And really, thank you for enlightening us with the leasing process. It is such an important thing these days, especially coming out of the pandemic. And for all you listeners out there, when you pay attention how to lease your units, well, that means you're going to make more money and you're going to have a lot less stress in your life. So thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Operate for Profit Real Estate Podcast with JC Castillo. If you're an apartment owner in Dallas-Fort Worth and you're looking for a property management partner that can help you make more money with less stress, go to operateforprofit.com to find out how you can hire Velo Residential. And if you like what you're hearing, be sure to leave us a 5-star review on Apple iTunes.
The way people rent apartments has changed. Today's renter has access to more information. Today's renter has more choices. The apartment industry needs you. Studies have shown that moving is the most stressful life event. The old sales training, well, it just doesn't work today. I'd like to teach you how to take the stress out of leasing apartments in a way that's meaningful to you and your renters and get you 7 times more leases. I'll show you how the perfect leasing process works. I'm gonna walk you through everything from answering the phone to closing the lease. I'm gonna show you how to determine your prospects' wants and their needs so that you can build value in your apartments. You will learn how to handle any objection or complaint. I'm gonna show you how to connect with your renter so it's easy for them to rent with you. I've taught the best property management companies and thousands of people just like you how to lease apartments. Property management is complicated. I'll simplify it for you. There's more competition than ever before. I'm gonna show you how to be number one. All of a sudden, your career, it's gonna make perfect sense. Even if you've never worked in sales or property management before. And for the advanced property manager, I'm gonna show you how to take things to the next level. Leasing University is a new, simple, step-by-step process that's effective. We're gonna help you become a rock star in property management. I'm Matt Easton, and this is Leasing University.